The scary experience of encountering spirits in the hospital is due to staff members having to stay overnight. They end up experiencing eerie events to the point that they cannot continue sleeping. Before we dive into our scary story, we would like to ask everyone to like and subscribe to support us in continuing to bring you more terrifying tales in the future. This is a story told by Diana that happened while she was working in a hospital. Diana mentioned that the hospital she worked at was a district hospital. There was a building in the hospital that people referred to as the 13-story building. This building often had strange occurrences because both patients and medical staff had repeatedly committed suicide by jumping off the building. This led to the building being notoriously haunted, known for having very aggressive spirits. No one knew the reasons behind these suicides. What Diana did know was that many people had died in that building. The building had a basement, which was used as a laundry room where hospital linens were cleaned, sterilized, and then sent to other departments. The basement was quite large. Diana described that, unlike typical basements with low ceilings, this room had a ceiling as high as 4 meters. Walking down into the basement, there was a large rectangular hall. At the end of the hall, there was a right turn forming an L shape. Each zone was distinctly separated. The washing area was apart from the laundry machines, and the folding area was separate as well. Normally, this department closed at midnight, and no one would go down there afterward. Most of the staff would have gone home by then. However, there was an incident involving 2 staff members named Christine and Neil. Both of them lived in different districts and usually went home after work. But on that occasion, there was a flood, making it difficult to travel back. If they managed to get home, it would be hard to come back to work early the next day. They decided to spend the night at the hospital. There was a room in the hospital for staff to rest during meal breaks or lunch hours, but at night, it was dark and very eerie. Christine and Neil decided to sleep in the basement instead. While they were finishing up their tasks and taking care of personal business, they went downstairs. In the room, there was a table about 110 centimeters high, 2 meters long, and 80 centimeters wide, just enough for someone to lie down on. The table had 2 tiers, the top tier and a lower tier about knee-high. The table legs had wheels for moving it around. This type of table was mainly used by staff to transport linens to various departments in the basement. There were a total of 22 of these tables. Christine and Neil moved one of these tables to the fire escape, as it was the brightest spot, though not very well lit, with only an orange light providing enough visibility. After moving the table, they discussed who would sleep on the top and who would sleep on the bottom. Neil suggested that Christine, being a woman, should sleep on the bottom tier as it had a cover that might help her sleep better, and he volunteered to sleep on the top. As they started to settle in, Christine felt something strange. Although they were the only 2 in the room, she heard the sound of someone moving the remaining 21 tables around. The noise was that of metal tables clashing together. Christine tried to listen to understand how the tables were moving. Then, suddenly, the sound came from the table she was lying on, which started shaking loudly. When she looked up, she saw that the table was shaking because Neil was moving violently on the top tier. Christine began to feel uneasy. At that moment, Neil, who was shaking, suddenly rolled off and fell hard to the floor. Christine was startled and lay there, watching Neil. She saw him slowly get up and, in a panic, he said, "Christine, run!" Neil then ran upstairs, with Christine quickly following him. They both ended up at the security post, where they sat down to talk about what had happened. Neil explained that while he was lying on the top tier, He couldn't sleep and heard the same noise of tables being moved and clashing as Christine did. He didn't mention it and kept his eyes closed. After a while, he felt as if someone was strangling him. Startled, he opened his eyes to see a middle-aged man sitting on top of him, hands around his neck, choking him until he could barely breathe. He knew the man wasn't human because when he struggled and looked at him, he saw a hole in the man's neck through which he could see the light from behind. Neil fought with all his strength, and when he finally broke free, he fell off the table. Regaining his senses, he immediately ran out. Christine heard that and was terrified, thinking that they definitely couldn't sleep there that night and needed to find a new place to sleep. Luckily, near the security post, there was a small room where they could sleep with a guard present all the time. So they slept there until morning. After that incident, more strange events occurred. There was another staff member named Jack, whose job was to watch over the laundry in the basement until midnight. However, that day, around 4 p.m., Jack suddenly went home without informing anyone. The next day, his supervisor called Jack in for a talk and asked why he did that, how he could abandon his job without any reason. What struck the supervisor as odd was that when Jack sat down to talk, he was trembling all over, with a visibly anxious expression. When asked, Jack didn't respond much. The supervisor then asked why he was shaking so much. Jack turned to the supervisor and said, "Boss, help me. It's following me."
I'm sorry.
"It's following me." The supervisor told Jack to calm down and slowly explain what had happened. Jack eventually revealed that while he was doing the laundry, he came across a cloth that looked like it belonged to a patient who had been in an accident, and it was covered in blood. When he picked it up, a large gold necklace was tangled in it. Overcome by greed, Jack decided to abandon his job and sell the gold. After selling it and getting the money, he rushed home. All the while, he felt like someone was following him but paid it no mind. When he got home, he saw that same man standing there. When he turned to look closely, he realized that the man wasn't human because his body was covered in blood. The man stood there and said, "Give me back my belonging." Jack immediately knew it was the spirit of the person to whom the gold belonged. He hurried into his room to pray, trying to ward off the spirit. But the more he prayed, the clearer the man's voice became. It started from outside but soon sounded as if it was coming from inside Jack's room, saying, "No matter how much you pray, I won't leave because you took my belonging." Jack was utterly terrified, unable to sleep that night because he kept hearing the man talking to him. The supervisor told Jack that what he did was wrong, but since it had already happened, the supervisor instructed Jack to take the money from selling the gold and donate it to charity on the spirit's behalf. The supervisor decided not to take any disciplinary action, considering Jack had learned his lesson. Jack followed the supervisor's advice. After that, he didn't experience anything unusual anymore. However, strange occurrences continued to happen in the basement frequently, prompting the hospital administrators to discuss what to do. They realized that if they left things as they were, no one would be able to stay in the hospital. Eventually, they concluded that the root cause might be the hospital's main pillar. The hospital had a main pillar situated right in the middle of the building. This pillar was round, with a circumference requiring 8 people to encircle it, making it very large. The pillar was hidden at the corner of a corridor, so people passing by could only see a part of it and didn't pay much attention to it. What was more frightening was that on the opposite side of the pillar, behind a wall and out of sight, there was a shrine attached to it. The building was initially intended to be a charity ward or a ward for underprivileged patients. Some parts of the building were designated for storing the bodies of authorized or donated cadavers for study. During the construction of this building, the hospital hired a company, and the contractor's name was Peter. Strange events started occurring right from the beginning of the construction. Peter often told his wife and close subordinates that he had strange dreams. Every night, he dreamt of a man approaching him, warning him not to embezzle money from the construction project. The man threatened that if Peter did, he would take Peter's life. These dreams repeated frequently. Despite knowing this, Peter still embezzled funds due to the large construction budget. However, after being warned repeatedly, he got scared and stopped embezzling but didn't return the stolen money. 7 days later, Peter died in a car accident. Witnesses said that Peter's body was mangled beyond recognition, with his insides and body parts scattered and unidentifiable due to the extent of the damage. After Peter's death, his close subordinate took over the project. This subordinate had the same dreams and warnings as Peter but ignored them out of greed. He thought nothing would happen to him because he wasn't afraid. Eventually, while supervising the construction site, an accident occurred. The subordinate fell onto the main pillar, and an iron rod pierced through his neck, killing him instantly. Reflecting on this story, it was reminiscent of Neil's experience in the basement. The manner of death was similar to the spirit Neil encountered. This was the first incident that led to a death in the building, and after that, suicides became more frequent. The hospital couldn't do anything about it, considering all these cases as accidental suicides. The hospital still exists today, and the building is still in use. This is the entire eerie story that Diana had heard.